What actually happens is that we have a competition committee for stakeholders, coaches, governors, and general managers, and that competition committee is the committee that dictates the state of the game. Officiating in the WNBA became as hot button of an issue as any. Heated debates surrounding the league's physicality dominated the headlines, particularly when Indiana Fever star rookie Caitlin Clark was subject to several intentional fouls.
There's a growing storm brewing in professional basketball, and it didn't start with a buzzer beater or a controversial draft pick. It began quietly beneath the surface of a league already under pressure and exploded into a full-blown reckoning. Stakeholders, coaches, executives, and fans found themselves swept into a crisis that now touches the heart of the sport itself. For weeks, WNBA audiences have voiced concerns over what felt like increasingly questionable officiating. Missed calls, one-sided whistles, star players targeted or seemingly ignored. On paper, these complaints were nothing new, but this time, it felt different because the spotlight was brighter, the stars more visible, and the inconsistencies impossible to ignore.
If the WNBA is not rigged, they're doing a great job of making it look like it's rigged. Because if you guys didn't see the referees literally, they made a bad call. And if you guys have ever played sports, you know that like when a referee knows they've screwed up, they will do everything they can to not talk to the players.
The turning point, a game that should have been another fierce showdown between elite teams, became the epicenter of controversy. Caitlin Clark, the rookie phenom hailed as the league's future, was at the center of it. As the final seconds ticked down, all eyes were on her. The moment was tailor-made for a highlight-tight defense, tension in the air, and Clark with the ball in her hands. Then came the contact, obvious, replayed from every angle. She was grabbed, shoved, hit, yet no whistle came. The clock expired. The play died in silence, and the silence wasn't just in the arena. It reverberated online. What followed was more than fan outrage. It was an avalanche. Footage exploded across social platforms, slowed clips, red circles, frame-by-frame breakdowns. Analysts, casual fans, even former players dissected every second.
The referees who were refereeing the Fever and Liberty game, that one of the referees seems like his only experience was actually refereeing high school games.
The conclusion was nearly universal. This wasn't an oversight. This looked intentional. And if it wasn't, the optics were terrible. Within hours, the backlash gained momentum. Analysts questioned why a league that depends so heavily on rising stars would allow them to be treated this way on the court. Longtime viewers noted a pattern, one where Clark took repeated hits without protection, and now that pattern had evidence. Then came the real twist. The referee at the center of it all disappeared. No public statement, no media availability, just gone from the schedule, suspended without explanation. Fans didn't need confirmation they had already identified him and demanded answers. Had the league acted, or were they trying to sweep it under the rug? That mystery deepened when an internal document began circulating, unconfirmed at first, but the contents were explosive.
And like I've seen referees be talking to coaches, and then mid conversation, just when they know they're in the wrong, mid conversation, just turn around and start ignoring players. If it wasn't for the fact that the WNBA is a professional sports league, this would be funny if the WNBA was not a pro sports league. Straight up. It would be funny.
It detailed a referee's private admission that he'd been pressured by league officials to manage certain matchups differently. In games involving star players, especially Clark, he'd been told to hold the whistle, to maintain flow, to avoid calling fouls that could shift the spotlight. Even more shocking, he claimed to have been compensated for this compliance. The name tied to that pressure, Cathy Engelbert, the very person meant to protect the league's integrity, the one in charge of upholding fair play. If what the document said was true, then the issue wasn't just bad officiating, it was coordinated manipulation from the top. Media coverage exploded, talk shows scrambled to react. Outlets from across the country sent correspondence to league headquarters. Engelbert offered no comment.
Stakeholders, coaches, governors, and general managers. Those are the people calling all the shots. Many WNBA fans are calling out the referee problem, and they are demanding answers and they are demanding changes. It seems like a lot of them are kind of being told what to do. There are other people pulling the strings above them.
but that silence only fueled suspicion. With public pressure at an all-time high, the NBA's top figure, Adam Silver, issued a rare emergency statement. He confirmed what many had feared. An investigation was already underway. Evidence had surfaced. Testimonies had been recorded. And based on initial findings, Engelbert had crossed a line. Effective immediately, she was suspended. The move sent shockwaves through the sports world. This wasn't just a league official stepping aside. It was a commissioner, someone with the power to shape the sport's future, being held accountable in front of the world. Reporters camped outside offices. Former players flooded media panels.
They are running away from the Indiana Fever players. As you can see, like, it's not just Caitlin Clark, it's Sophie Cunningham. And he's like, no, I'm not looking. No. And you know bad refs, because again, I live in a country where there are good refs and the good refs know who they are, but the standard of refereeing is absolutely shocking.
Everyone wanted to know, how deep did this go? What else had been buried? It didn't take long for new details to surface. Sources close to the investigation revealed more than just testimony. They had messages, memos, logs of conversations, and internal directives. These communications allegedly encouraged referees to take a more physical tolerance approach during certain games, especially ones involving Clark. Subtle language, phrases like "let them play" or "don't over-whistle." Not direct orders, but clear enough to set a tone. A tone that, according to multiple referees, shifted how games were called. Whispers turned into statements. One ref claimed he was told to "call it tight for everyone else," but not her. Another admitted that post-game evaluations became weaponized, praising refs who followed the league's unwritten rules and punishing those who didn't. The implication? It was systematic, not a one-off, not rogue officiating. A strategy. Meanwhile, Clark continued to take hits, some minor, some severe, and every time she looked to an official for help, there was nothing, just more play, more silence. When Clark eventually left a game with a quad strain, fans didn't just see it as an injury, they saw the result of weeks of unchecked physicality, a buildup that had gone, ignored too long. For many, it confirmed everything they feared. Players started to speak, quietly at first, then louder. Coaches voiced frustration in post-game interviews. Teammates defended Clark publicly. Even former legends stepped in, questioning whether the league had allowed insecurity and control to cloud judgment. And still, Engelbert remained quiet. But the story refused to fade. It only grew. Investigative reporters pieced together timelines. Footage compilations backed up player accounts. Internal sources leaked more material. Then came the final blow. Confirmation that the suspended referee had given a sworn statement. He described being approached before the season, told directly to scrutinize Clark's plays more closely, and let marginal contact go uncalled. He even admitted the league gave him financial bonuses tied to how he managed games featuring Clark. He never used Engelbert's name directly in that testimony, but the chain of command was clear. The origin of the policy wasn't a mystery. That changed everything. Silver responded with more urgency. The NBA's ethics and compliance teams joined the WNBA investigation. They traced calendar meetings, email chains, expense reports. What they found only deepened the concern. Some memos from WNBA leadership included phrasing that investigators saw as coded instructions, guidelines about perception, narrative control, managing hype. Phrases that on the surface looked harmless, but in context read as influence. Engelbert, now completely removed from public view, issued one brief legal statement denying all wrongdoing. She called for a fair review and declined further comment, but the public had moved past, waiting for her side. The story had become too big. In response, Silver called for an unprecedented move, a live summit, open to players, open to coaches, open to the media. When he stepped onto that stage, the room was packed. Every camera pointed at him, every mic live. Silver didn't waste time. He confirmed the referee's testimony was credible. He verified that language had been used internally to influence officiating. And while he stopped short of calling it bribery, he made it clear this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was misconduct. It was manipulation. And then, in a statement that would echo across the sports world, he announced Engelbert's removal as commissioner. In her place, a temporary leadership group was formed made up of players, coaches, and executives charged with restoring faith in the league. The first steps, a full audit of officiating protocols, and the formation of an independent board to oversee referee performance moving forward. There was no celebration, just relief. maybe even hope. As for Clark, she returned to the game shortly after the announcement. No grand statement, no victory lap, just focus. She didn't ask for Engelbert's resignation. She never lobbied for special treatment, but her performance, her injuries, and her silence had forced change. She became more than just a player. She became a catalyst. And now, as she steps back on the court, the spotlight still follows her. But this time, so do the whistles. Fair, balanced, as they should have been from the very beginning. The fallout from Adam Silver's emergency announcement was immediate and far-reaching. In just a matter of hours, the news of Cathy Engelbert's suspension began flooding every corner of the sports media world. Former players who had remained neutral began to change their tone. Talk shows aired urgent segments dissecting every detail of the investigation. Leaks were no longer just rumors, they were shaping the league's public image in real time. One of the earliest aftershocks came from inside locker rooms. Coaches across the league, who had quietly shared frustrations with officiating behind closed doors, were now willing to admit what they'd been suspecting all along. Something wasn't right. For months, players had been warned about how physical games might get, but no one expected a pattern to emerge where one player, the face of the league's future, would receive significantly less protection than others. The stories weren't just isolated complaints. They were lining up in sequence, supported by footage, timelines, and now, internal testimonies. Some players admitted they'd noticed the imbalance, but didn't feel empowered to speak out until the scandal exploded. Others confessed that they had begun adjusting their play styles to avoid being caught in the inconsistency. Several even described moments during games when they stopped mid-play, expecting a whistle that never came, only to realize it was Clark who had taken the hit. That kind of recognition doesn't happen unless there's a pattern one everyone can see, but few dared to say aloud. Clark's teammates, once quiet out of professionalism or fear of league discipline, began speaking in defense of the rookie star. Kelsey Mitchell, one of her closest teammates, captured the league's larger concern in a single phrase: "If your stars aren't protected, what are we building?" Her comment wasn't just about one game or one injury. It was about the future, about longevity, about the value of the league's most important assets being jeopardized for optics or control. That's when the discussion shifted again. What began as outrage over a blown call had now become a reckoning for league leadership. Silver's decision to suspend Engelbert wasn't just about ethics, it was also a strategic move. The WNBA was growing. Record attendance, spike in ratings, merch flying off the shelves. Caitlin Clark had become a driving force behind it, but the league's mishandling of her early weeks risked alienating not just her fans, but a new generation of WNBA supporters altogether. The business side of the league wasn't blind to this either. Several corporate sponsors began privately reaching out to WNBA executives. Some expressed hesitation about moving forward with marketing campaigns that centered Clark until there was more transparency. Others delayed scheduled ad rollouts. A few paused event planning entirely. The financial implications weren't massive yet, but they were a clear warning. Trust was bleeding, and in a league still carving its space in the national sports landscape, trust is everything. Behind the scenes, Silver and his team were working quickly. The NBA's ethics unit had already started examining not just Engelbert's communications, but the structure she had created. They dug into meeting logs, reviewed referee assignments, scrutinized game reports, and what they found continued to support the growing suspicion. Clark wasn't being treated equally on the court, and the decisions around that weren't arbitrary. Referees were expected to follow an unspoken code, one that had been handed down in briefings, hinted at in memos, and reinforced by performance reviews. Those who stayed within the invisible lines were praised. Those who didn't, especially if they called too many fouls in Clark's favor, were quietly removed from high-profile games. This system didn't require direct orders. It thrived in suggestion, implication, and a network of rewards and consequences that shaped behavior without a paper trail. That made Silver's next move even more critical. He needed to break that system in full view of the public. So, he did something no one expected. He called for an overhaul of the WNBA's officiating infrastructure. In the same statement that announced Engelbert's removal, he introduced an interim leadership committee made up of a mix of former players, coaches, and business leaders. Their first responsibility? To review all officiating protocols with a focus on bias, transparency, transparency, and consistency. That review would be followed by the creation of an independent oversight board, one that would monitor referee performance separate from league influence. It would audit game footage, analyze whistle patterns, and review internal reports for signs of imbalance. It was, by all accounts, the most ambitious integrity reform in WNBA history. Still, even with all these moves, the focus remained on Clark. When she returned to the court, the entire sports world watched. She didn't make a speech. She didn't call out names. She simply played. But this time, things were different. Referees responded quicker. Obvious fouls drew immediate whistles. And while the contact didn't disappear, the protection was finally there. Not because she asked for it, but because the league was forced to confront how close it came to losing the very thing it needed most. As footage of her return made the rounds, so did a deeper narrative, one not just about basketball, but about institutional accountability, about what happens when leadership fails, and the athletes themselves become the only defense against injustice. Clark never used her platform to escalate the scandal, but her perseverance spoke volumes. Her ability to play through hits, silence, and mounting pressure became a symbol of something much larger than one player's experience. More officials began stepping forward quietly, and through legal protections, their stories confirmed what had already been suspected, that the Clark policy wasn't unique. It was simply the first one to be exposed. The league had, at times, manipulated perception by directing referees on how to manage specific matchups, and while some of these instructions were vague or open to interpretation, they created an environment where referees learned to guess what the league wanted, rather than enforce the rulebook with consistency. One veteran ref described how officiating evaluations were slowly weaponized. He explained that after games, supervisors would sit down and review foul counts. If too many whistles were blown on a particular defender, or if a star player like Clark got too many calls, it would be flagged, not discussed for improvement, but flagged for correction. And by correction, he meant consequence. Another referee, still active, recalled being told in preseason training to let it breathe when Clark was on the floor. At first, he didn't question it, but after several games, he realized the phrase wasn't just about game pace, it was about optics. If Clark looked dominant, the league looked like it was being carried by one person, and that narrative, he suspected, made certain officials nervous or worse, directive. It was this accumulation of quiet rules, selective enforcement, and organizational silence that pushed the league to the edge. And in the end, it was Caitlin Clark's ability to endure it all without demanding special treatment that forced the system to finally blink. When she spoke after her return, she chose her words carefully. Her message was short. "I just want to play the game the right way." That was all. And yet, it was enough to remind everyone what had been at stake, not just her performance, but the very credibility of a league claiming to be built on fairness. She never needed to call for Engelbert's removal. Her grit did that for her.